what did the community actually contribute that you think Local Motors could not have produced on its own? Do you think that if Local Motors had been able to, would have been able to have done what you achieved through co-creation on its own? If not, why not?
I give you a quote, Nemo. Do you
Yeah,
remember
sure.
Jay Rogers? He would always say the best people, the smartest designers and engineers probably don't work for your company, right?
Yep, I remember that one. Yeah. And so what you're able to do is when you have these siloed product development teams, right? Your engineers, your designers, your product managers, and stuff like that, you create, by nature of them being siloed, you create echo chambers, right? And eventually, even if you have dissenting voices within the team, eventually it kind of is a regression toward the means. Everybody marches to the beat of the same drum eventually, and then you wind up with a product. Now, that's not to say that you can't make good products that way. Obviously, you can, because that's how product development has been done for hundreds of years before that.
Nemo, can I ask a question? You're clarifying regression
Yeah.
toward the mean. We tend toward average ideas that have been done before, with very
Right.
little, like very
Because
incremental improvements, but not vast improvements, not a
and they are
fundamental.
and the regression to the means is constraint driven, right? Because that's budget driven, that's schedule driven, and that's scope driven, right? And so what happens is you get into risk mitigation mode rather than innovation mode.
Trying to move toward the sure thing
Co-cre-
rather than
co-
rethinking it.
co- Absolutely. What co-creation does is says we can add more voices through these, as you said, controlled means and through these various different functions and mechanisms that kind of manages the chaos of all those voices. Still maintain schedule, still maintain budget. Scope, we'll see. Because what bubbles out of the community helps determine scope. And then we still have a mitigation effort. But now we have one mitigation effort instead of all three.
Can you explain that a little bit? That the scope you said it comes from the community. What do you mean by that? And how does that affect an actual project?
So when we were in design challenges, quite often the winner of the challenge, usually selected by a jury of experts and with some influence from the community in the down select process, that was what product we were to some degree committed to create. Obviously, some challenges were for the sake of doing some cool innovation and thought, and there was no product that would come from it. But in some cases, there were products that came from it, like this little guy right here. Right, that's a product of co-creation right there. You see where I'm pointing. So the idea there is the diverse voices that were involved in the process of coming up with those innovations wouldn't have happened because they were completely independent from any of the constraints that stopped those voices from coming internally. Right? They didn't operate under the same constraints. And so they're free to explore.
So what you're saying is that in order to run a successful co-creation platform, you can't make this promise like, hey, we're going to do this, everybody join in, and then in the end, you don't make anything, right? So you kind of have to make things.
But that's all dictated going back to what you first said, and I entirely agree that it has to come from the brief. The brief has to be robust enough that it's not only creating what you expect people to take on with regard to challenge, what problems are they solving, but it also sets up the preliminary draft of your evaluation criteria to evaluate the ideas that come later with no anticipation of what those ideas may or may not look like. Right? So by having a really good brief, you set yourself up for success on various different levels of the co-creation brief. You know how you're going to critique the ideas that come to you. You know how you're going to evaluate and choose the ideas that come to you. And at the end, it helps mitigate the scope based on what you choose.
Yeah, because you can't really just tell a community and expect them to be creative when you're saying like, oh, and it has to be within this budget, and now they have to go out and like create a bill of material for their design. It's too much of a burden.
you can give shadows of that and say, hey, we're not going for the most expensive components. It is a budget-driven process, so be budget-minded. But we're going to do that work anyways. We still want innovative ideas. And what's interesting is, especially when dealing with engineers and designers, they're so used to working within frameworks of scheduling and budget that they do it second nature anyways. Right? Especially the ones that we had the opportunity and absolute joy to work with within our community. Some of the most talented people we've ever had the opportunity to work with came from the community, and we're still in contact with them, and we're still, acquaintances to this day. And this is almost 20 years from the genesis of co-creation as far as Local Motors is concerned.
So, okay. So Nemo, you said, hey, when we don't know exactly what's going to come out of it, which is the whole point. That's the whole value, right? Because you're going to get all kinds of designs that solve problems that you didn't even know could be solved potentially. And they might not even be in the winning team. They might not even be the winning product. You also, in a co-creation community, you get access to these people. You just said, you still keep in contact with people today. Like, I'm still LinkedIn connected with people, and if I talk to them, we'd have a good conversation. We'd pick up right where we left off. So talent, you don't really get that when you're trying to, like on YouTube, right? You don't get access to those things. And so there are all kinds of externalities, I guess, from this process that benefit the company.